The candidates for November are set.
I know Donald Trump's type.
Between now and Election Day,
we are not going back.
A campaign season unfolding faster.
Kamala Harris is not getting a promotion
Than any in recent history.
Make America great again.
Follow it all with new episodes every weekday on the NPR Politics Podcast.
This is Soundside.
Hearing static when you enter a tunnel in the middle of a fascinating story? Hanging out in your driveway to catch the end of a report? We've been there. With the KUOW app, you can listen to your favorite programs anytime and anywhere. No driveways required. Let's get going. Download the KUOW app now, available for iOS and Android.
When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go downtown.
Seattle used to be a superstar city, a technopolis by the sea.
These are my top 5 reasons why I love Seattle.
Sure, it had some problems.
And don't think for a moment that the visitors to our city don't notice.
But overall, Seattle had a reputation as a place full of talented workers, great food, and fun things to do.
We're one of the smartest, number 9, safest, number 3, and sexiest, number 2, places on the planet. The world can judge us any way it wants, but those of us who live here know we're always number 1.
But for several years now, it's felt like some of that glitter is gone.
Don't tell us that this is the best that you can do in building cities.
And it's not just Seattle. Downtowns across the country are struggling. So what would it take to put the shine back on our cities? I'm Joshua McNichols.
And I'm Lucy Suchek. This is Booming, a podcast about the economic forces shaping our lives here in the Pacific Northwest.
We're in the midst of one of the most significant transformations of downtowns in decades. So we talked to city leaders all over the country to find out what they're doing that actually works and what Seattle can learn from them. That's coming up.
We're playing the biggest hits in the land by the biggest hit makers in the world. And one of those hit makers climbs 4 notches this week to number 5. Here's the hard-rockin' band called White Lion with a change of pace ballad called When the Children Cry.
So Joshua, I know a lot of downtowns have been struggling to recover. People are throwing around phrases like downtown doom loop.
America's big cities are facing major problems.
From sky-high interest rates to the reluctance of employees to return to their office.
The impact of higher rates and the banking stress is hurting smaller businesses across the country.
Many of which can be summed up by a controversial new phrase, the urban doom loop.
But it seems like Seattle is having a harder time.
Yeah, it's been at the bottom of a lot of economic recovery lists for a couple of years.
Yeah, but you've brought us some solutions.
Yeah. Recently, cities from all over the world converged on Seattle for a big meeting of the International Downtown Association. It was basically a convention for people trying to help their downtowns recover. These were government workers, economic development folks, and people from business improvement districts, like the Downtown Seattle Association.
I had no idea that there was a conference just for downtowns.
Yeah, there is. And like any tight-knit community, they're kind of nerdy. They have their own special vocabulary. Like they call themselves UPMers.
UPMers. Explain that.
Well, it comes from the acronym UPMO, UPMO, or Urban Place Management Organizations. So, there's that. But they're the perfect people to ask for new ideas from. So during my 3 days at the conference, I spoke with people in hallways and at lunch and after presentations. And I asked everyone, what's the most surprising strategy your city has taken that has worked?
So what did they tell you?
Well, first I learned that Seattle is not alone. A lot of cities are going through this, and a lot of them are trying the same strategies that we are, frankly. Like, every city is trying to build more housing downtown. That's just, best practices. And almost every city has some kind of program to fill vacant retail spaces with pop-up businesses. And, Seattle's doing this too. We've probably heard a lot of stories about that. But I was looking for surprising solutions that would be new to Seattle, or at least that would be significant tweaks on strategies Seattle's already trying that could lead us in new directions. And there were 5 that really stood out to me.
Okay, let's hear a top 5 countdown.
Number 5.
San Francisco. It's turning vacant lots into hotspots, creating more places people want to hang out. Like there's this one spot they won an award for at the convention.
So it's a 3-acre parcel that was planned for redevelopment later on. We knew that there was going to be a period of time where there wasn't going to be development and it would be fenced.
Mike Rieger is with the neighborhood organization that came up with this idea. And the problem that they're trying to solve is they want to entice workers back downtown. And they want to draw residents out of their apartments. And vacant lots do not help with this. They're like a missing tooth in the smile of a downtown street.
I love that metaphor. The city needs to go to the dentist.
Yes. And in San Francisco, they put in a filling. Basically, they paved over a big vacant lot and put a bunch of stuff on top. There's food kiosks, there's a bar, and a beer garden. There's street soccer fields, which are basically a tiny version of soccer. People play pickup games there a lot. There's a couple of big TVs showing sports, and they have all kinds of activities there. There's yoga classes, dance lessons at night, and outdoor movies. Rieger says it's packed at lunchtime, and it's packed in the evening.
We have a huge happy hour scene going on.
It's a big hit with the neighborhood's residents. And here's the thing. He says that office workers are coming to work specifically so that they can spend time there.
They knew they wanted to go play pickleball like after work or visit the bar.
Yeah, this feels huge. Bringing people back downtown, not just for work, but for what they can do after work.
It does kind of remind me of a couple things Seattle's doing, putting pickleball courts downtown. Everybody seems to love that idea.
Yeah.
And then, Westlake Park and Occidental Park, there's programming there. There's a giant chess set and stuff. But San Francisco shows the importance of critical mass. If you pack enough of these things into one place, it becomes enticing enough for people to want to come back to work. Okay, next we're going back in time to an old strategy that's new again.
Number 4.
Denver, Colorado is bringing in wooden push carts.
Yeah, our push carts are wooden. That goes back to medieval times. It's a very simple design. We decorate them in the holiday seasons with pre-lit garlands.
What? Please explain.
Push carts, right? What are some examples of things that people sell from these push carts?
So we have everything from jewelry to honey to hot sauces and even to handmade crafts that are imported by our immigrant population as part of their entrepreneurial journey.
That's Sarah Wiebenson who's talking there from the Downtown Denver Partnership.
So how are wooden push carts going to help their downtown? Because
push carts make it easier for small businesses, and I mean very, very small businesses, to participate in the economic life of downtown. A lot of cities, as I mentioned before, have these programs designed to get startup businesses into vacant retail space. Seattle does this too. And Seattle also has little kiosks on the waterfront that people can sell stuff out of. Those are examples of very low overhead ways to start a business, and they're part of this strategy to bring in more businesses owned by people of color who've been shut out of the downtown economy in the past. But Denver's push carts go further. They represent an even lower rung on the economic ladder. It gives people with very little money a place to get started. And if they're successful, they can think about expanding into those larger spaces, maybe a waterfront kiosk or a vacant storefront. And eventually, they could move into something more permanent.
Yeah, so this feels kind of similar to Pike Place Market or other places where there are pop-up craft fairs. Like, they're not permanent, but they just come ever so often. How is this different from that?
Well, it is kind of an expansion on that principle. The Pike Place Market is a great place to start a small business, and it's highly successful. It's one of the brightest spots of economic activity in downtown Seattle now. Push carts could help expand its impact into other parts of downtown. You could kind of think of the Pike Place Market as an octopus. And it could start sending tentacles of economic activity down other streets. like down into that new pedestrian zone on Pike Street between 1st and 2nd Avenues. If you combine push carts with food trucks, you're starting to get close to that kind of critical mass that it takes to draw workers and residents there, like we saw in San Francisco.
Yeah, that makes sense. And push carts and food trucks are mobile.
Yeah, so these push carts, they can be a way to spread economic activity to other parts of the city and a way to grow more businesses from the ground up. And we need more businesses downtown.
Okay, what's next?
Number 3.
Employee-owned businesses. For this, we're going to Berkeley, California. A lot of businesses around the country, everywhere, have closed since the pandemic. A lot of restaurants, a lot of retail stores, and many of them have been city landmarks for years. We've seen that happening here in Seattle.
Yeah, I can think of a few. I remember when McPherson's produce market was closing, people were really upset.
Yeah, and this was happening a lot in Berkeley, too. So Berkeley looked into what's causing the closures there, and they found a lot of baby boomers opened these businesses a long time ago, and then at a certain point, maybe during the pandemic, maybe long after, they just got tired of running them.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them don't have succession plans. So the guy I talked to from the city of Berkeley, his name is Kieran Slaughter, and he gave an example of a Berkeley restaurant that was going to close. They said, we're going to close the next week. It was called Betty's Ocean View Diner. How important was this restaurant to the community?
Extremely important. It's one of the key businesses on that shopping district, on that corridor, right? It's one of folks' favorite places to stop and grab something to eat. And so we use it as an opportunity to see if we could retain this business. It was a long shot, right?
So Berkeley and a nonprofit partner walked them through this process. They kind of have a public-private partnership going on there because there's things the city can do in terms of sort of reducing some of the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And there's also things that the nonprofit can do in terms of helping a specific business. So together they kind of walk through this process, and lo and behold, now Betty's Ocean View Diner, it's just called the Ocean View Diner now, but it's employee-owned.
We've got some statistics that shows that employee-owned businesses have a higher retention rate of its employees, and some of them are part owners. They also make more money, but the business stays, and it also just maintains the legacy of the business. You're not swapping out the sign, you're not swapping out all the, the recipes. It's not just some new, business that doesn't have any connection with the previous business. So it allows that long-term, sense of history to continue.
It can be really frustrating for a lot of people when these legacy businesses leave.
Mm-hmm.
So this solution has helped preserve some of the ties that bind people to these neighborhoods. Washington has a newish sort of state program to help do this too, but we don't have a program specific to Seattle the way Berkeley's is specific to its business owners there. Berkeley is making it feel like a priority in the way that it doesn't feel like it is here.
All right, we're getting near the end. What's number 2?
Number 2.
Number 2 is follow the data. This one comes from Baltimore, and it has big implications for how we respond to crime downtown. Public safety, or the perception that it's not safe, is one of the reasons some employees don't want to come downtown. And it's one of the reasons businesses give when they close too.
Right.
But you can actually have a bigger impact on crime in downtowns if you follow the data to neighborhoods outside of downtown that actually have higher crime, and if you invest your resources there.
Mm.
In Seattle and in a lot of cities like Baltimore, people tend to think of violent crimes and property crimes as being very high in the heart of downtowns relative to other neighborhoods.
When we crunched the data, we found that that was not the case.
I talked to Hannah Love, who studies public safety for the Brookings Institute. That's a nonpartisan think tank. She says the data shows crime is actually higher in a few neighborhoods outside of downtowns.
So there really was a gap between perception and reality there. The reason that we point to that gap is not to say, perception doesn't matter. It's to really highlight the importance of following data about where crime occurs in order to find solutions.
So when they follow the data to these specific neighborhoods outside of downtowns, what are they doing to help with crime there?
Well, for one thing, they're realizing that the answer may not be as simple as just bringing in more police.
Mm-hmm.
It's bringing all the city departments together to address some of the core problems in these neighborhoods, like lack of housing, lack of job opportunities, and in Baltimore, derelict buildings. So, for example, Baltimore offers people a stipend while they look for work and gives them more money when they complete tasks like turning in a job application. And the city demolishes derelict vacant buildings. And in some cases, it pays locals to take those buildings apart piece by piece so the parts can be reused through this labor-intensive process called deconstruction.
Yeah, all these things seem really smart to me. Is it working?
Yeah. Since the program started in West Baltimore, shootings and homicides there have gone down by 1/4, and carjackings by 1/3. And those crimes have not moved to other neighborhoods.
That's huge.
Yeah, compare this to Seattle, where the Seattle Times reported that carjackings have tripled in the last year.
Wow. Okay, so if I'm worried about crime downtown, what should I take away from this?
That by investing in programs in other neighborhoods where crime is higher than downtown, we have a better chance of making things feel better across the whole city, including downtown. Lucy, are you excited for number 1?
I am so ready. It feels like I've been waiting for this for years.
Number 1.
This one comes from Hollywood, California. Kathleen Rawson is with a neighborhood organization there, and she told her board about her idea.
They said, what do you mean you're going to throw a rave on Hollywood Boulevard, right? All these conservative property owners on my board, what do you mean you're going to do that? Do you truly think that's the best thing for the neighborhood? And I said, yes, I do. Yes, I do.
A rave in Hollywood. That is so typical. Why a rave?
To bring people together. I mean, Hollywood is famous for the film industry, but it's also a working neighborhood full of people from across the economic income spectrum. And there's very little public space for those people, for the non-celebrities to gather. They don't get invited to those, big gala openings at the, when a new film comes out. That's just for movie stars and their friends.
Yeah, I guess I never thought about it that way.
Where do they get to come together, right?
Yeah.
Well, the streets are public space. It's some of the biggest collection of public spaces that there is. So in Hollywood, they closed the street to cars and held a giant electronic dance party there.
Oh my gosh.
It was hosted by these DJs called Fisher and Lake.
It was magnificent. It was magnificent. The streets were filled with laughter and fun. And it was a ticketed event, but people on the rooftops and the surrounding residences and the surrounding hotels were able to enjoy it.
And more than 11,000 people showed up.
Wow.
And you know what the beautiful thing about it was? I got a complaint. I got a text from one of the residents right there. Holy cow, Kathleen, what are you doing? It's so loud. I said, oh, Anita, it's going to be okay. Hard stop at 11, I promise. I get a text an hour later, and she said, she's on the rooftop of the Astor, which is right up Vine a little bit. She said, oh my God, this is the best thing ever.
Make some noise!
Afterwards, the artists and the organizer donated $100,000 to the neighborhood group that organized it. And that group used the money to buy new garbage cans.
Wow, so smart.
I think the overall lesson here is that people need reasons to come downtown.
Yeah.
And this is as true in Seattle as it is anywhere else. And all over the country, different cities are taking over the streets as public space to give them those reasons to come downtown. Like Philadelphia is closing 7 city blocks to cars every Sunday in September.
There were these kids that had been told, little kids, their entire lives, stay off the street. And now they're being told to play in the street. And it was magical for them.
And in Portland, there's this sort of grassroots project. People are taking over the streets for bizarre group bike rides.
For the whale song karaoke ride, we were blasting out whale songs interspersed with Little Mermaid riffs and then stopping to do karaoke in animal voices. I had to pinch myself. Like, these are a bunch of full-grown adults enjoying themselves singing in animal voices to karaoke. Imagine, like, meowing to Alanis Morissette.
Seattle has tried doing these takeovers in small ways. You know, a couple of years ago, the city took over part of Fifth Avenue for basketball and pickleball. But the Hollywood Street Rave was an example of how bigger, bolder street takeovers can change the way that people talk about downtown forever.
Wow. I'm excited for Seattle's next big rave. I do have one last question. What do you think the biggest lesson is that you learned from the downtown conference? What kind of stood out to you overall?
Well, one thing that really surprised me when talking to all these people is that people look to Seattle for leadership because it's one of the wealthiest cities in the country with one of the largest and best staffed downtown associations.
Seattle and other cities like Seattle, Boston, New York are really benchmark, like golden goose cities for us smaller Baltimores, Pittsburghs, in my opinion. I want to be able to point to Seattle and say, they did it, we should do it too.
That was Claudia Jolin, who's also from Baltimore. And she told me she wishes Seattle would take the lead on more of these strategies.
I think there is a underlying almost like we look up to you because you have the infrastructure, the investment. And so we look to districts like Seattle, like the Downtown Seattle Association, and what are you guys doing to really push innovative policy to provide equity in development? Because when you do it, that gives us the opportunity to push our policy.
A lot of the things we learned about today rose out of the hardship that downtowns faced during the pandemic and then later because of remote work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here in Seattle, we're kind of at a crossroads now. You know, cities in general are sort of at crossroads. And there have been some big changes here. You know, Amazon is calling its downtown workers back to the office full time. And this is going to be a trend. You know, other places are going to follow that too.
Yeah.
Interest rates are dropping, which means that more projects will start construction, and that could pump some more money into downtowns. And so for the first time in a long time, we're actually facing the possibility that things could go back to the way they were. It's still a distant possibility, you know, way out on the horizon, like a ship that you can sort of barely see. But I think we have a chance now to ask ourselves, is the way things were good enough? Or will we let the things we learned make the city even better than it was?
Coming up next, the end game.
KUOW is here to help you cut through the noise of election season. Check out Sound Politics, a new podcast hosted by me, Libby Denkman, and Scott Greenstone. Plus, KUOW's partnership with A Braver Way podcast hosted by Monica Guzman, your guide across the political divide. More at KUOW.org/elections.
Hi there, I'm Monica Guzman, host of A Braver Way podcast and your guide across the political divide. Are you done with the divisiveness in our politics and ready to do something about it? This season, we've partnered with KUOW to reach more listeners like you. Join me as I sit down with guests from across the political spectrum. Together, we'll share tools, insights, and messy, real-life stories to help you face this election year without losing heart. Listen to A Braver Way now on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
So, Joshua, we've been talking about ways that cities have been drawing people back to downtown. So Jenny, our producer, did a little research into some of the most absurd ways that people for years have been drawing crowds.
Okay.
So this isn't like specifically downtown, but it's crowds of people. How do people get people together?
Okay.
These are some of the weirdest festivals and events that I've ever heard of. Okay, so how this is going to work is I'm going to give you some multiple choice options about these events, and I want you to guess what you think is the right answer.
All right, I'm game.
Okay. So the first event we're going to dig into is held in the capital of Yukon Territory, Whitehorse in Canada. That's a 5-hour flight north of here, right up by Alaska, if you're wondering. And this is a contest that starts once temperatures dip to about -20 Celsius or -4 Fahrenheit. So pretty cold.
Okay.
It ends in March. And people are creating something in those temperatures. So I'm going to give you a few choices to guess what they're doing.
Okay.
Besides just being cold. A, they're making frozen sock art.
Frozen sock art. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
B, they're freezing and sculpting their hair. Or C, they're making frozen floral bouquets.
I'm going to say sculpting their hair, just because that sounds like fun.
You're correct.
Oh, yay.
It is their hair. In order to compete, you have to register in person at a hot springs in Whitehorse, dip your hair and face in the hot springs, allow your hair to freeze, and then sculpt it. And once your hairdo is ready, you ring a bell for an official to take your photo.
That's so fun, because it's just a celebration of something that probably happens naturally that usually annoys people.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can win a prize of $2,000.
Wow. Nothing to laugh at.
All right, next one. This one is from Gloucester, England. People from around the world come to chase a certain type of food down Cooper's Hill and try to catch it. Some say the tradition is 600 years old, but the most recent written record is from around 1826. And this is fully considered a sport. There are men's and women's divisions, so, people take it pretty seriously.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the question is, what are they chasing? Is it A, a Crown Prince gray-skinned squash? Don't ask me what that is because I have no idea. Is it a wheel of double Gloucester cheese? Or is it a tin of Lyle's black treacle? What is that?
Treacle? It's something really sweet. I think, is it related to molasses in some way?
What do you think it is?
I think it's the cheese. I mean, because they're famous for their cheese, so it's got to be like a big wheel of cheese rolling down the hill.
You're right. Yet again. It's the cheese. It's a 7 to 9 pound wheel of cheese, and Cooper Hill is the steepest hill in Gloucester. So competitors stampede down the hill after the cheese, and, people get injuries, but it has not discouraged many people from participating.
Huh.
Guess how fast it can roll down the hill?
Oh, goodness. Let's see. I'm going to say 40 miles an hour.
80. 80 miles per hour. Yeah. Yeah.
That is some speedy cheese.
It is some speedy cheese. Okay, last one. This is a little closer to home. This festival celebrates a storied legume that grows prolifically in Washington. It all happens in Pullman, where 25% of the U.S. crop is produced. And people have been celebrating it for 35 years with a parade, a 5K run, music, sports tournaments. It's a big thing. So, what is this tasty, fiber-rich staple? Is it A, lentils, B, soybeans, or C, chickpeas?
It's lentils.
It's lentils.
Yes.
100%. You got it right.
Yeah, because that area is famous for lentil production because it's the Palouse, which is this area where, Eastern Washington's so dry and the clouds have wrung out a lot of their moisture before they get there.
Yeah.
But then, they start to pick up moisture as the clouds travel over Eastern Washington. And then the land starts to rise in this place near Walla Walla called the Palouse. And it's one of the most fertile parts of the state. And they're known for their lentils.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm sure that's a great exporter, but Canada is actually the world's largest producer and exporter of lentils.
Oh, so
just in case you're curious.
That's a proud title for them to have.
It is. Well, that is it for this week's Endgame. Great job. You got all 3 of them correct, so I'm super proud. And great job.
All right, thank you. That was fun.
That's it for Booming.
Thanks for listening. As always, if you enjoyed what you heard and you want to hear more of it, please donate to the show at kuow.org/booming. Thank you.
Our producer is Jenny Cecil-Moore. Our editor is Carol Smith. I'm Lucy Suchek.
And I'm Joshua McNichols.
And we'll see you next time.
KUOW is here to help you cut through the noise of election season. Check out Sound Politics, a new podcast hosted by me, Libby Denkman, and Scott Greenstone. Plus, KUOW's partnership with A Braver Way podcast hosted by Monica Guzman, your guide across the political divide. More at KUOW.org/elections.